Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again for another episode. And I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Carol Arnold. Carol, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Carol, you recently were honored with an award from the city of Kerrville. Could you tell us what that award was for?
It's Women's Month, and so the Kerrville Chamber did a special with there were 12 of us actually, from dancers to singers to artists to enables with the symphony uh, orchestra. And they honored us for all the arts and what we have done with the programs here in Kerrville, Texas. And I was there to represent the Museum of Western Art.
What's your role with the museum?
I am an artist. I teach classes actually. They're a workshop in June this year, and I'm in their Roundup program, which is April 25th through the 27th, where they raise funds for the museum to keep the doors open and support the artists. And I've been a strong advocate for the museum for many years now.
That's one of my favorite weekends is Roundup.
It's a wonderful program, and if anyone doesn't know about it, you should really attend. The artists come from all over the country. Their top ranked artist, Daryl Beecham, has done an amazing job as a director of the museum. And I can't speak highly enough about it. Even the building itself is a treasure. Everyone should come to that.
What I particularly enjoyed about it was or is the artists are actually doing art.
Yes.
And they're painting, they're sculpting, they're drawing, and it's like an open class session.
Mhm.
And they explain what they're doing, and they absolutely love it. They love explaining it. They love talking about it. They love seeing people watch them create, and it's really just a wonderful experience. The wives or husbands or of the artists are thrilled that people come over. I told one woman about the podcast, and I work with Daryl on his podcast, and she was the wife of an artist, and this went on for 5 minutes about how much her husband enjoyed being on the podcast. So it's almost interactive.
It's a wonderful program because we get to actually show people how we create. We get to demo and people ask questions. And it's wonderful when you find someone that's interested in what you're doing and wants to know how and the whys. And to be able to share that with others is a great thing that the museum does because honestly, producing art, creating art is a pretty solitary thing that you do on your own, usually by yourself. And to be able to share that with others as you're actually making the art is really a fun, interactive time for us as an artist.
I'd like to explore your journey in art. And I've talked to people on this podcast who started when they were 4, when they were 6. One lady started when she was 68. When did your journey begin?
I always tell this story, and I think this even got published in Southwest Art magazine a few years back. But when I was in second grade, I went to a slumber party, and the mother had a art contest, and each of us had to draw a painting. And I won first place for my picture of a little girl picking flowers in front of her home, and I won a little turtle and a live turtle. I got to take home, and I thought that was so cool as a second grader that somebody appreciated it, and I've got a turtle to take home, and I always laugh and give Lauren Payne credit for her slumber party for putting a little seed in my garden about that art can be fun. I always have enjoyed drawing and painting. It's been an emotional outlet for me. A lot of people would keep diaries over the years, but I didn't ever like putting down my thoughts because I didn't really want anyone to read exactly what I was thinking, but I could put down pictures and places I'd been and drawings to express myself, and that brought me a lot of joy personally to do that.
Where'd you
Um,
grow up?
I grew up in Dallas, Texas. From in the city, my dad was a rancher, though, oil and gas and ranching, and so we spent a lot of time out in the country. I always grew up with horses, had a horse and stables, and spent a lot of time outdoors and by myself and appreciating nature. And I think that was another thing that helped me to establish my love for art.
After your slumber party win, did you continue drawing through junior high and high school?
I did on the side. I always, like I said, I always did draw in college. I took some art classes, but my major was petroleum land management. My family were more on the business side. No one was an artist, and so it was not anything that was encouraged or even discussed. And It wasn't until after I graduated from college, had my 4 children, they grew up and moved on, that during those times when they were in high school did I start realizing what I really had in my heart that I wanted to do, to be an artist.
Were you a landman?
I was a landman.
Tell the audience what a landman did in the late '70s and early '80s, and is it different today?
A landman in the late '70s and early '80s, we would travel out to the landowners, we would find who owned the mineral rights in the courthouses. We'd go through the documents by hand because they weren't computerized at that point. We would go out, we'd sit at farm tables, ranch tables with people, and we'd talk to them and tell them why and what we wanted to do to lease their minerals so we could drill. Or in one instance, I was a coal landman in West Virginia and Illinois, and I would go to the homes of the farmers out there where they were mining the coal. And it's definitely changed nowadays because everything's computerized. I don't think that there's as much one on one contact as there used to be many years ago.
I don't wanna be presumptuous, but I will presume you were one of very few women landmen, at least in Texas.
I definitely was. In the '70s, the women were, there were a few of us. I had 2 or 3 friends that were in the land management program at UT, but we definitely were a minority. And I guess I'll tell the story that I got elected as the president of the Student Landman Association at UT, and they came to me afterwards and they said, "We don't think the industry would appreciate a woman being president right now. We're gonna make you vice president, and Bill's gonna be president." And I was not a women's right person. I earned every piece of respect that I ever had. And so I just was always taught by my father to play the cards that were dealt you, and those were the cards, and I continued on and played those cards.
We had at least one professor in common, and he was memorable to both of us, and
Mhm.
that was Nick Woodward. And I
Yes.
wanted to ask you to say a few words about what did Nick Woodward mean to you?
Nick Woodward was a tough landman. He worked for Exxon, I believe, before he became the head of the Landman's Association or the Landman program at UT. But he was fair and he believed in me. And I think that belief in me carried me through the program. It carried me through life. I think that's the first time in my life as an adult, I would say adult being in college, that people were believing in who I was. And so I, at that point, began to believe in who I was as well. And I do owe that to him. And he was always a very special person in my life. And I will always remember him very, very lovingly.
I had him for one class, and here I remember him, so I hear exactly what you're saying, and actually, I can envision him in my head, and that's exactly how I would envision him being. Did you, you mentioned working in, I think, Pennsylvania, perhaps West Virginia. Did you work professionally all over the United States?
My first job out of college was with Exxon's coal company, and it focused on coal mines in Illinois and West Virginia. And so I think Illinois and West Virginia were my 2 big places that I went right out of school. I lived in Houston. I actually was one of the few women that went down in a coal mine, which was, I didn't know at the time, they considered bad luck. And going 600 feet down in the shaft and getting to the bottom, it was a rough place for women. And I just carried on. But they weren't very happy. First of all, I was the man from the main
Company man.
company man, and also being a woman. But it was something I'll never forget because I know I was one of the few people that could see that part of history of being in a coal mine.
What brought you to the hill country?
About 27 years ago, my husband and I and our 4 children lived in Dallas, and there was always a piece of us that felt had a very warm heart for the hill country. We both went to UT in Austin. I used to come to the country and teach horseback riding at the different camps. And so, following some nudges from the Lord God above, we followed what He wanted us to do, and we picked our kids up and we moved to Kerrville. And we thought if it doesn't work out, we can move back to Dallas. My husband's an attorney, And we're still here after 27 years. So I think it must have worked out. And it's been a wonderful place to raise children and to be an artist as well. It's got a wonderful art community.
You told us a little bit earlier that after your children were grown, you turned back to your art. Could you tell us about that?
When many years ago, I guess in 1999, 2000, I had a little epiphany one night. I was thinking, what was it in my life I wasn't doing and why was I not doing it? And the answer was somehow the Lord told me I was supposed to consider art and be an artist. And I never would do that because of the fear of rejection and not being good enough. There are always people better. And how do you start and being so vulnerable to put that out there? And I finally said, if this is what God wants me to do, I'm not going to say no anymore, and I'm going to conquer my own fear. And so that's when I decided to start taking lessons from other artists. And at the same time, I was raising my children. So at night, when they would do their homework from 9 p.m. on, I would get out my pastels, and that is actually how I went into pastels. I didn't have to mix colors. I didn't have to mix paint that would dry. I knew exactly where I was picking up and putting down, and I could come back to it after dinner, driving carpool or helping the children. And so I did that on the side for a few years. And as I slowly graduated one by one, I could increase my efforts in the art community. And that's what I did.
Did you eventually start having shows, or before even that, were you exhibiting at certain galleries, or how did you move to a more public facing artist?
I had people that, again, it's people that believe in you. I had some friends, Mike and Cynthia Allen, and he owned a bank here in town, Security State Bank. No, Security State Bank. It was, I can't remember the name right now, but he had a show for me at his bank, and it was well attended, and people purchase things. When somebody buys something, it's very exciting because that make you feel like you have reached someone, and there's a lot of joy in sharing. And that was the beginning, and I did a show at Grape Juice. A few years later, they started having artists, and that was always a wonderful, wonderful thing to have those kind of shows out there. And then I just started selling on my own, and then there was a gallery in Salado that picked up things, and it just sort of grew over time. I just always said this was the Lord's gift to me, and so whenever any door opened, I would go through it and see where that led me. And over the years, that would lead to different galleries and to different opportunities to show my art. And again, with social media, that became a wonderful place to sell and to reach my friends and people that didn't live in this area, but lived in my Dallas community, my Texas community where I sell. And so it just sort of developed over time.
Do you specialize in any particular genre, such as landscapes, animals, something different?
I love landscapes. I'm drawn to landscapes. I do a lot of West Texas because I can identify with West Texas and the hill country. I did a lot of dog portraits. That was a big thing for a while. Everybody loved doing dogs and having a portrait of their dogs. I've done wildlife from quail to coyotes to rabbits. Just basically, it's the wildlife and the wild naturescapes that I'm drawn to.
Now, when you say West Texas, we have a woman we've interviewed named Elaine Capers,
Mhm.
and she counsels us that Kerrville is not West Texas. West Texas is actually West Texas, not here.
She's
So
talking about Iran and, McCamey and,
Fort
that area,
Davis,
Fort
and
Davis and Alpine,
so when you
and
say West Texas, what do you mean?
I have a love for further west, the Big Bend area, the Big Sky West, Marathon, and the Gage Hotel. I have artwork at the Gage Gallery in Marathon, which is wonderful because that gives me an excuse to go out there. And I do the, Trappings of Texas show at the Museum of the Big Bend in Alpine each September. And so when I say west, that's what I consider west. This is to me the hill country, and where you get less trees and more cactus, that's the beginning of west to me.
The I'm really fascinated by landscapes, and as another artist explained to me that they have you all have ruined me because when I see the land now, I see multiple colors. I see different shades of green. I see different colors off light. and I see them change throughout the year. And so last year, it was one of the rainiest summers we've had in quite some time. So we saw actually green in August and we saw green into the fall. But then color starts to change a little bit as we move into November, December. And so I wanted to say that to introduce how do you see the colors and do they change? And how do you then incorporate what you see into what you draw or paint?
Not to get too technical, but if you think about it, and with the use of iPads and things, the first thing I see are values. It's how dark or how light, and it's the light that makes a scene beautiful because you can have a cloudy day and you can have a scene with trees and the plants and the pasture, but until you put a light on it and there's reflection and the dark is dark and the light is light that feed off of each other, it may not speak to you. So I try to deal with the value that I see first, and then the color is the ice cream, the cream on the top that you add after you get the value because you have beautiful color in the fall and in the winter. And even now, when it's brown, you have different shades of brown depending on what you're looking at next to a few flecks of really light color that can be beautiful depending on how you capture it.
You mentioned iPads. Do you work off iPads, photographs, or do you simply close your eyes, see it in your head, and paint it?
I do not just close my eyes, see it, and paint it. I either if I don't do it out in the open, which would be plein air, the painting in real life, which I'll do a very small painting in real life and bring it back to capture certain colors or certain values. But then when I get in the studio, I've taken pictures where I'm gonna what I wanna paint, and I will edit it as far as make it the size. Like I'm doing a 9 by 12, I'll edit it to be a 9 by 12, and I'll decide what it was that I wanna capture and what it was I want to relay to others. And the iPad gives is a great tool for that and a great tool for teaching in my class. When I teach workshops, I talk about taking the color out because people will want to paint the color, but if you don't have the value, if you don't have how dark or how light it is in relation to everything around it, your painting will not read correctly for your eyes. If you think about it at night, we see black and white. We don't think about it because it's just our human nature. But when you go out at I'm going to really ruin night for you. I'm going to tell you, go out and look at the values because that's all you're seeing. You're seeing no color in the dark. But it's very interesting when you apply that to how you paint.
It's hard for me to describe my favorite time of year, but certainly this is one of my favorites as we move from a winter to an early spring into just an explosion of color. How do you capture something like that in a drawing or painting?
I know you've seen a lot of people, the wildlife, the wildflowers in the hill country are just amazing. And like, as you say, they just come alive after a rain. And there are so many bluebonnet artists and so many artists that capture this. Each of us have our own style. My style is not to capture each little tiny flower, but to capture big masses of color. So I might have a mass of blue and next to the mass of green and pink. And I try to let the person that's looking at it use their imagination to fill in the blanks. And to me, that's good art when you can have a painting that from afar they're thinking you have drawn in all those flowers, but when they get close up, they see there's just a mass of color. And so that's how I try to capture it is in bigger masses of what I see as opposed to drawing in individual flowers, because your imagination should play a part in what you see in your art. You should fill in your own blanks.
Let me change the focus a little bit. Do you have any upcoming shows in 2025 you can tell us about?
We have Roundup coming up April 25th to the 27th here in Kerrville, which is a big one. It's a big show, great show. I actually have a show April 12th. I have a new gallery in Bernie that I'm a part of, the Carriage House Gallery, located in downtown Bernie, and it's got about 12 artists of different genre, and I have a show April 12th there. anyone and everyone's invited to come 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. to that. And then in September, we have the Trappings of Texas at the Museum of the Big Bend in Alpine. And those are my bigger shows that I have going on. I do online shows. I'm trying to balance family with my artwork, and that for an artist is sometimes can be tough, but I'm happy with what I have going on now. And
Will you be teaching in 2025?
I will be teaching June 3rd through the 5th at the Museum of Western Art here. I have already 5 people signed up. I haven't advertised yet. It's really a great program, a great place to teach. We have the benefit of all the beautiful artwork on the walls to talk about. And my classes are very low key, very geared towards the person and what they want to express. I really love letting people express what they're trying to say instead of me trying to tell them what I'm trying to say. Because to me, art is a very personal thing and a very personal expression. So if anyone is interested in trying to move further in their art career or their just art life and doing something personal, they're welcome to come join my class. And you can sign up through the Museum of Western Art.
Carol, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you or find out more about your art, is there a place they could go online?
Yes, I have an Instagram account. It's C Arnold Fine Art. Unfortunately, Carol Arnold in Boston got Carol Arnold art. And so she and I connect a lot because we have a lot of overlapping people. Don't know the difference, but my Instagram site is C Arnold Fine Art, or my Facebook is Carol Arnold, and I'll be glad to friend you. And I have a website, www.carnoldfineart.com as well.
Carol, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with us, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate what you do.